last time. This worked. Now go on Instagram, my other page, and going live. Hopefully you guys can. It takes a minute. When you click on it, be patient with it.
We are live on Jeff's Instagram.
And Twitch.
Which means all of the feed. Yes, Restream has received it all. We are going.
Let me just make sure that Instagram creator mode is live. That one was acting goofy. That's the one that's still acting goofy today.
Look at that.
Okay. All right. Can you just talk and I'm going to play with this a little bit, Parisa? Kick us off.
Yep, I was making sure all the other ones were going. Looks like we're good on all of them except for the one that we need to be live on. So we will be patient as usual. Brian, you were a little fuzzy, but welcome everyone. Welcome to Creators Union Live. Brian will come into clarity in a moment. I believe it. We have Lynette with us today, in addition to obviously the one and only DJ Jazzy Jeff. But I mean, if I'm being honest, we have like the real star of the show, Lynette. Lynette. My personal fave.
So I'm rolling with it.
I'm here for all of this. Okay, so to start us off, hey guys, everyone from Instagram, we've got YouTube, we've got LinkedIn, Twitter or X, whichever you want to call it. I still kind of am an OG and I like to call it Twitter. Habits die hard. And I'm a very analog millennial, so I like to say Twitter. So to start us off, Lynette has not been able to answer this question yet. And I realized I goofed last week when I presented the question to MC Light and to Kane, to Big Daddy Kane. I had them go through the question and I didn't tell them what it meant. And I've been sitting with it all week. It's been like eating at me all week. I was like, okay, if I do this again, I'm doing it correctly. So Lynette, you get to have this done correctly. And my brain is here. It's all here. So question is, what is your favorite color? And 3 deep reasons why. And when you respond, after you respond, I will let you know what the significance of that question is and those responses. So favorite color and the 3 deep reasons why.
Does it matter that I've heard everyone else do this?
It does not matter because it is so individual to you that that's kind of like the beauty of it.
Okay. Favorite color is red. It's always been red.
Ooh, okay.
For the very obvious reasons.
How obvious?
Fire. No, and the funny thing, fires, passion. I like energy. I like bright. I like colors that are, or I like bold. I like it because it's a bold color. I like it for a couple reasons. Randomly, it reminds me of food.
Food, okay.
Yeah, like
tomatoes.
No, I hate tomatoes.
I'm sorry.
But yeah, food. I was designing a kitchen and designing our dining room many, many years ago when we first moved into the house and started researching colors and the things that, like certain rooms and the kind of energy that those colors can bring. And a lot of suggestions about red were related to stimulating your palate or just being a stimulating color in general. And so red was always kind of like, oh, kitchens, when you think diners, when you think that sort of thing, and dining room. And so, fun fact, there is a bottom part of our wall in our dining room that's red for that reason. Yeah, I don't know. I've always liked red because it pops. It's one of those colors that it adds some extra energy, like if you put it with any other color. And I don't know, I just like it. You said much deeper than that? I don't know.
Okay, can I help you a little bit? Okay, so you've mentioned stimulating, bold, it pops, it just like invigorates. So all of these words are words that elevate the physical experience or like the physiological experience of the moment, of the time, of the setting. What about it is so significant to you about stimulating the environment or have it to be bold and invigorating or captivating? What about that draws you?
It is I don't know. It's activity. I like the idea of people being involved. It means that there is an energy together. You know, it's like you said, stimulation and passion and energy, excitement. I think of those things to be like, let's all be excited together. Let's all be energetic and enthused about a thing. You know, I think of, yeah, that's what I think of. It's kind of like empowerment, maybe even. Like I think of, I'm really energetic in the way I deliver things, and I am almost wanting everybody else to feel the same amount of energy and passion and excitement about whatever the thing is as I do. And sometimes it happens and sometimes it doesn't, but you know, it's like, come on, everybody. Yes, look at us. This is amazing, you know. And that's just kind of how I feel like I exist in this world sometimes, most times.
Well, considering that you've had the question many times and the way you connected it in the end, I think if I were to put like a summary on it, is like this like felt aliveness is all of what you described. I wrote down all the different descriptors you mentioned, and it's like this like felt aliveness. It's not just like being alive and like just hanging out and chilling. It's like you actually feel the potency of being alive. And when I think of, as you said, red, I'm like, oh, blood flowing through the veins, but like actually flowing through.
Mm-hmm.
So, and like that aliveness together is huge. I love it. And I feel like that accurately describes you. So for anyone that's listening and has not heard this question before, the question was, what's your favorite color and 3 deep reasons why? And ultimately it's a question that really is saying, this is how I feel about myself, or this is how I view myself, and 3 reasons why. And so, Lynette, I feel like that from what I've experienced of you, that's right on the nose. So I love that. Yes. And you're the only red that no one has answered red yet. So that's awesome.
That's true. Most people they've said some color like blue, purple, still dope tones though, when you think about it. I haven't heard
purple, that's it. And white, but yeah.
Have you gotten a gray or brown before?
No, but guess what, Brian? You're up next.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
Oh, you are up next because it adds a lot of, pun intended, it adds a lot of color to the conversation, especially with what we're going to be diving into today, which is where creativity and longevity meet one another. So even though you're, as it says, you're a technologist and you're like the wizard of all tech people that I've ever met, I do believe that you have a creative side to you because I've experienced that. So this also applies to you. So Brian, what's your favorite color and 3?
Well, I think I gave away my hint. And this is also like kids sit in the back of the class, by the way. So as you say something.
I'm also a credentialed teacher, so don't worry. I see all that sit in my class.
Okay, you sit behind the girl with the big hair. I got you. I'm going to say I gave it away, brown. And so I grew up, I would flash around. I still remember one day I got on the bus to go to school at about 13 in California weather. Lynette, I had this big red, it was like bomber jacket meets swim coat. And the bus driver stopped.
Wait.
I need to understand.
Yeah, I really, bomber jacket meets swim coat?
So you know the swim coats that go all the way down where I grew up.
A parka?
You haven't seen swim coats, those big, thick coats that they hang all the way down past your knees to your ankles. They wrap up in between swim meets and wear them.
Google's swim coat.
Okay.
Yeah. I've never heard that.
I've never seen it.
They used to make them in teams, right? Like Raiders have them.
Yes. Well, and at some point in the I'm sorry, Lynette. You see it now?
I'm looking it up. I'm saying, what makes you think we know what that is?
I literally have
Californians
You see
talking
my
about
shirt?
swim coat.
I've never seen a swim coat in
Oh,
West
and we
Point.
got a D1 All-American swimmer here that is saying, "What am I talking about?" All right, so that threw my
I see
story
now,
off.
yes. Okay,
Okay.
so everyone, it's a long coat. We're just gonna call it a long coat.
It's a
It's like
long
a
down coat.
nylon,
And
except instead of terry on the outside, it's more nylon looking. But think of it like a robe that you would wear when you got out the shower or something.
that is stuffed with goose to keep you very warm and nylon, right? But that is so far off the point of the story.
Keep going. Continue, Ray.
But so on that, I raise it because at some point in the Bay, we were rocking those. But it's actually, when you look back, it's pretty ridiculous. We were walking those in California sun. Anyway, I was just going to tell a story about how the bus driver just stopped. He wouldn't drive. And he's like, dude, are you an artist or something? Because I would show up in fuzzy Kangos and all kinds of crazy shit. Flash ahead though to now. For a while, my favorite color was brown. Now my favorite color is gray.
Thank you.
I don't know if this could qualify as a deep reason, but I've always liked flexibility, right? I actually don't want to be the first guy seen when I'm in the room, or I'd like the ability to not be able to be seen. So I like gray because gray is it's subtle, it's calm, but within gray, right, you throw in a bit of yellow. All of a sudden, gray takes on that meaning of yellow. You throw in a bit of red. And I think for me, I've taken pride, that growing up, I can go from the boardroom to the street. I can be authentically myself, but flexibly move between worlds. I think that between worlds, cultures. So I think that's great. Gray comforts me. I think gray gives me some flexibility. When I'm feeling fly or I'm feeling so fresh and so clean, I can throw some red on top of it, and I'm good to go.
I love that the technologist had to throw
That was great.
He had to throw an Outcast
I'm a
line.
little jealous of his answer.
It was deep, and he ended with an Outcast line.
Clean. Did I do the homework assignment, Parisa?
I mean, I do think you could have gone a little deeper into, actually, not you could have, you can right now. This is your opportunity. Dive a little deeper into the desire you have to blend in.
Oh, you're trying to go to a whole nother place here.
By the way, I'll just let you know, on Jeff's thread that they're saying that gray is wisdom.
Ooh.
That means you're older. Yeah.
Nice. No. You're missing that. It just means I was an old soul. I have the wisdom of an old soul. Now you reminded me there's people on the stream. You want to know the real of why I think it is? It comes from two things. One is I was the middle child. The really deeper thing, which is a whole nother podcast, is I was born at Stanford Hospital. I grew up in Palo Alto. I was always another, right? I was always one of the few brown or black kids in class, right? And growing up in Palo Alto and being one of the few brown or black kids meant you stood out. It is me getting pulled over left and right, doing nothing. So I would believe that existence of trying to figure out how to navigate as an other in that environment that James and I were in Palo Alto, that taught me the power of being able to lay low, right? I don't, there were real consequences. James will probably tell you way too much about my childhood, right? But there were real consequences to standing out. We'll put it that way. And I'll also add, I grew up in the Bay at the height of and Parisi, you're too young for this, but at the height of the crack epidemic, right? I lived in Palo Alto next to East Palo Alto, which at that time had the highest murder per capita of the world. You go to San Jose, you go to Oakland, they ask if you're from Palo Alto. 5 times out of 10, we're fighting right there on the spot. So again, when you're running in those environments, it's a little easier just to go in and lay low. But that's the next level of depth to the answer. There's a lot underneath that.
That's huge. Thank you for sharing that. And I think that, I mean, it may just seem like like, yeah, it's the deeper layer. Of course it is. And I think that we don't give enough credit to those reasons or those like that response, but like those true deep reasons why, like how they actually do impact our creative process. And I'm saying this from a place of that I've done extensive research within myself, my own life, but then just like the creative process, then how the brain operates within the creative process and the different parts of the brain that are activated within all of that. So I'm saying this from a place of that, like, it really does impact how you experience your own creativity and how you feel safe enough to access that creativity. Because creativity can also be problem solving. It's not just in what we can have the idea of like traditional art or music form. Creativity comes in, I mean, literally, it's problem solving all day long. It's hearing something or watching something and having your own idea about it. It applies itself every minute of the day. So I appreciate you sharing that, because that's huge. Because as you're talking about being pulled over and like just this wanting this desire to fit in, blend in, right? I'm thinking like, I don't experience being pulled over in that same context, but at the airport, oh my gosh, I always make sure I wear things with no pockets. Because I get searched every single time at TSA. It's just my name and where my family comes from, and it is what it is. Doesn't matter if I was born in the United States. So it's like I get that very intentional, the very intentional approach to just establish safety so you can go on and do what you need to do. I mean, because it is just a basic functioning of humanity is experiencing safety. So that was awesome. Thank you. And I think Jeff is a little jealous of your answer. So
That was good.
I think safety for me, when I think about going to the studio with Jeff, was a cheesesteak from Ishkabibbles, by the way.
That's safety.
That made me feel comfortable.
Oh,
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever had one.
You've never had cheesesteak from
From
Ishkabibbles?
Ishkabibbles.
I know you've had cheesesteak.
Yeah.
There's something about Philly that is, I don't eat like that anymore, but it just provided a lot of safety for me. Anyway, carry on, Parisa.
right. So I think comfort food is a different, it's the next level of cushioning of safety. I think it's once you have safety, you can experience the comfort food, but I digress. So I have a question for you, Jeff. It's a little different direction than where we are just at. So what's a piece of advice that you are so glad that you never took?
Ooh. Do something else. I think that especially coming up in the 80s, the path that I took, especially the path as a DJ, there was a period in time that I was afraid to tell someone. When someone asked you, what did you do? And you said you were a DJ, the first thing that they asked were you on a radio station? Because there was really no definition for the so-called street DJ or freelance DJ. You had to kind of be a DJ for a specific reason. You had to be the DJ on a radio station, the DJ in the club. So when you told someone that you weren't on the radio and they were kind of like, well, where do you DJ at? It's a little awkward, you know, it was a little awkward in the 80s telling somebody in the street. So it was, you know, there was a level of semi-embarrassment that the landscape hadn't kind of formed itself enough for you to tell that to someone else and they kind of understand it. So, you know, people, oh, you're DJing in the street. Oh man, you need to get a real job, or you need to go to school, or you need to do something else. And I had a lot of people to tell you to make different career choices.
Do you think any of that was their own insecurity, or did they just not see the direction that you saw within it?
I think it could have been a bit of both, but I definitely will. I'll definitely will put it that, you know, when you know, it's kind of like when you're the first at something, no one really understands what the landscape. You don't even understand what the landscape is, but I think, you know, more times than not, you kind of realize that people are afraid of the unknown. Like trying something for the first time, you know, being the first. You know, I joke because, you know, James and I would talk about when, you know, the internet really started to be a thing. There was a point in time that people kind of looked at James and didn't really understand what he was doing because it was so new. You know, is that was the same thing in hip hop. What are you doing? You're doing something that's going to be not here in 3 months from now. So what are you wasting your time for? So I think that whole uncharted waters thing, kind of, there are people that are really afraid of that.
Right. Makes sense. I feel like
That's
it's a super valid, I don't want to say concern, but I think it's a super valid experience as a human. Before I go on, James, is there something you want to say?
No, it's just well, I never really related that parallel to the fact that, you know, hip hop in its infancy looked crazy to people. You know what I mean? Like, and I mean, I'm still in that mode right now. I'm playing with digital AI twins today, and people are like, "What is that? Like, what are you doing? What are you doing with your time?" And it's so interesting that, for those of us who can see around corners, who are blessed gift to see around corners and see things that other people don't see, that sometimes it's a bit of a lonely planet to be able to see around corners. And the question is, like, I do consider myself an artist, as a technologist artist. How do you maintain doing it even when everybody else says don't do it?
Oh, it's definitely a lonely existence, you know, for a certain part. It's kind of like you're the first person at the party and no one believes that the party's going to be popping, and they're asking you, why are you there? You should be here. Everybody else is here. And you just have this gut instinct that I believe that this is about to be the party of the century. And then you start watching people file in and it turns into the party of the century. And then you're, the same people that kind of laugh at you or not understand, all of a sudden get it.
I think we're kind of underestimating how much a capacity for risk taking plays into this conversation, because you can have a bunch of ideas and the capacity to even take a risk on an idea could be the make or break of ever, seeing that idea through to, execution. Even with this, you're the youngest, Jeff, and I think that, and so am I. And how we talk about, out of necessity, the older you are, or when you have more responsibilities, all these other things that come into play can alter your capacity to take a risk, because you probably don't have the luxury of being able to take those risks when other things are at play. And, I think even for you, Jeff, at that time, it's give me a job I can recognize. You taking a risk on a thing when you're in West Philly and that's your livelihood we're talking about. But you being the baby where you have all of these older siblings who were full-on adults in their own, at that time, your ability to take the risks in a way would have been a whole lot more, and same with me. It's like, oh yeah, I could just try that out, sure. And I think that we are kind of discounting it just a little bit, because some of the ideas of having those foresights and all of that is one thing. People could have all the ideas of like, yeah, I believe you, but I'm gonna let you go first because I'm not willing to or can't afford to be the first. So just wanted to throw that out there.
Yep.
Lynette, you're amazing because you were exactly on the same thought thread as I was with introducing risk into this conversation, because although this conversation is deeply about, creativity and where creativity meets longevity, if you don't talk about risk as a pioneer of anything, then you can't get to longevity, right? And I feel like that's such an important piece of that. So I'm so glad that you're already on my wavelength with that. I'm like right on time, because that was literally the next segue to this, because you're so right in that. And especially even as the order of the family, wherever you fall in line, if you have siblings, that deeply impacts your relationship with risk. The oldest is typically the least to be risky, actually. So, and I think it's the more, obviously the bigger the family, the more you go down the line, the more freedom that those siblings or those kids will feel that they can. But because there's so much already put in place within a family system or structure, or the needs are so present, there's less of that freedom to actually take up and lean into. So it's kind of like a both and of both spectrums. So
Can I add something to that?
mhm.
So it's interesting, this whole idea of risk. I actually read a NPR report many, many years ago about the difference in risk taking between girls and boys. And at the time, my daughter was young; she was 5 or 6. And the study basically was saying that, for boys, we allow them to jump off things and do all kinds of crazy things, risky behavior, but we don't really allow girls at a young age to actually take risks. And so I made it a point for me, and if anybody's listening, take those risks. And if you're raising a daughter, wow, give them the ability to do that, to take a risk, to jump off something. Because when I heard that report, it was in the middle of giving a friend some advice about taking a new job. It was a way out there job. It was with these guys called Summit Series. And I was like, that sounds crazy. You don't need to do that at all. Go keep that job you have. And I literally heard that story and called her back, and she ended up taking the job at Summit Series and helped her whole career. But, I just want to put that out there. It starts early. It's not like it happens later on. There is a difference between girls and boys in risk taking.
And culturally as well. Some cultures look at risk for women as something you don't do, even if they're 45 years old. You just don't do it.
Yeah. Well, and I was going to add, Parisa, just some cultures, right? Almost risk aversion can be inherited, frankly, right?
Yes.
And we could say that, for some of us, so let's also note that risk inherently includes not being afraid to fail, right? Not being afraid of repercussions, because you have to accept those if you take risk. And as you say, in some cultures, some societies, and for some races, the repercussions of taking risk were much higher. Therefore, they're inherently risk averse.
Completely. And when you say feeling, safe to risk, safe to enter into risk, like your comfort level with risk, it all comes down to if you feel safe, or if you've been taught that it's safe to play in a risky environment or to take risks. It's all about that. Some people are taught literally, it's not safe to be risky. It's not wise to be risky. Just take the path that's already determined, that that it's going to be fruitful. It's going to get you the results. People know that your job title is, they don't have to keep guessing and try to keep figuring it out. Are you on the radio? Or are you not? The radio makes sense. We know what the radio is, and so comes all back down to being gray. I think you guys are all wearing like a version of black or gray today, except for me. I totally missed the memo. Which I love.
Mine is a little bluish gray, but yeah, gray nonetheless.
Well, it also connects to probably what a lot of our, listeners who are out there and thinking about, do I put out my music independently? That seems risky. The machine isn't behind me. Look at Jeff's face. Jeff's like, what?
Well, I mean, because the machine didn't necessarily exist when I was doing, like, none of those things have really applied to me. It was just, I didn't really have a template, ahead of me, because the especially that part of the industry hadn't formed yet. So it was just, I didn't really have a bunch of haters that was just like, why are you doing this? More than anything, it was kind of like, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing? Like, I can't even, it could have made all of the sense in the world, but if I don't understand what you're doing, I don't know if it makes sense or it doesn't make sense because this is brand new.
When's the last time you did something? What was the last risky decision that you feel like you made, Jeff? Just to put you on the spot.
Deciding to do a live concert on a live stream and try to make it sound like it was a recording with all kinds of technical barriers in your way.
Yeah, that was a risky thing.
That was
risky behavior.
What was the fear? What was the biggest fear, or like a list of fears that went into that?
Oh man, well, technical difficulties, things cutting off, things not sounding the way that they want to sound. You want to try to, I always try to give a certain level of quality of stuff that I do. And I'm a really big stickler for that. So I would rather not do it if I can't do it right. And that probably was the biggest risk, piecing that together. Like, I was on pins and needles the entire time, even though everything was sounding absolutely amazing, but it was still, there were so many technical barriers, the latency level. If I would have recorded it and just played it back, I could have made sure that it was perfect, but you're trying to basically mix a live audio on the spot, for it to sound great for the public and the musicians that were playing at the same time. That was a big task.
If I may, on this risk conversation and the creativity conversation, it was just sort of dawning on me to have to go back to days of yore. I know we talk a lot about how brave De La had to be, right, to come out with something that was completely different than anybody was doing then, and in fact, sort of the antithesis. But I don't think what we talk about a lot is that your first album was actually significantly different than anything anybody was doing at that time, right? And I can think about how, not that you're thinking about it in that young mind, but I go to my creative process and right how much courage it takes to pour something out from your inside, construct a song, and throw it out there. And there's nothing to give you the safety net that people are going to like it. All right. Now we flash forward to standing up and doing Mag Mob, what you're doing now, right? You stepped up during the pandemic and took a risk. So that shows me that you have taken risks multiple times throughout your career, and leads me to ask, what role has risk played in your career? How has it sort of helped you get to where you are now?
I think a lot of times I look at it like, what is the worst that can happen? And I think, so many of those decisions, you have in your head, like these are 100% your decisions, because, a lot of times people don't understand what you're actually trying to do. But I think I go in my head and I say, what is the worst that can happen? And if the worst thing that can happen is going to land me exactly in the position that I'm in right now, then take the risk. Take the risk. If this isn't going to set me back, if it's just, when you have someone that says, I really want to go for this, and I say, okay, well, if you go for it and it doesn't work, where will you end up? And if they're like right where I'm at now, then take the risk. Then absolutely take the risk. So I think that process in my head, I'm always asking, if this doesn't work, where will you end up? Because, not everything works, and then some stuff works today and it don't work tomorrow. That's the part that I think a lot of people don't understand, that in your timelines of life, nothing is longer than your life. So the timeline of your friends might be this long, the timeline of your business might be this long. And I think we always have this thing in our head that everything is supposed to last forever. And I think when someone posed a question to me years ago, where do you see yourself in 20 years? And I was like, exactly where I'm at right now. Like, this is what I want to do. This is where I'm at. And it doesn't have to get better.
Interesting. Yeah.
Well, I just want one tap, which is when you were doing those things, we're talking about post DJing, talking about first record, was it easier to take risks because you had a partner who also was willing to take risks? Speaking of Willard. Was it easier to take risks because you had someone else that was like, you gonna jump? I'm gonna jump. Let's jump.
Oh, listen, I don't want to, the whole misery loves company loves company. Like, is if you got your man with you, you kind of like, yeah, let's go into this bad neighborhood. Cause I got somebody that I at least have somebody with me. It's actually harder when you do it by yourself. But I think being young, that is one of those things that, I would often ask myself when I'm 12 years old, I would jump from the top step of my mom's house to the bottom step with no regard. When I'm 30 years old in the best condition of my life, there's no way in the world I would do that shit, because my brain comes in and I'm thinking of all the repercussions. Sometimes I want to take my brain out as much as I can to go back to that 13-year-old kid that would jump down the steps.
Well, no one's doing brain surgery and removing brains, but I understand the desire and the analogy there. Question for you, Jeff. What I think would be super helpful for people to connect with you on this. So when you're dealing with something where you feel like it's risky, right? What are those things that you have in place that help you as you move through something that feels like there's high risk involved?
A partner that is not afraid to take risk also. Like, I think that is something that's really big, that I think I was blessed, to have a partner that in those quiet times when you're saying, I have an idea to do this, you don't have someone to say, that's crazy, that doesn't make any sense. It's funny because I remember Will telling me about his manager, and he said, if I go to him and I say, I want to do a show on the moon, he doesn't laugh, he doesn't snicker or sneer. He says, let's call NASA. And he said, if you don't have people in your life that look at things like that, you need to slide them to the side.
Let's call NASA.
I love that. Let's call NASA. When you tell somebody you want to go to space, you want a partner that's going to tell you, let's call NASA.
Listen, I mean, we wouldn't have hip hop. We wouldn't have half of the stuff that we have now if we didn't have someone to come up with the craziest idea and have someone else co-sign it, because the worst that can happen is we're going to end up right where we are right now.
Right. Back on Earth in this case.
That's
I did want to jump in and ask Parisa on something you said there. You talked about sometimes you want to get your brain out of it so you could take risks. Is that part of your creative process in the studio? I mean, it's there when you're really pursuing phenomenal creative output. Is there a bit of that finding Jeff of old? Right?
Let me tell you something. I try not to put my brain, and it's going to sound crazy, I try not to put my brain in the studio at all. Like, I don't want to think about it. I want to do it. I get a chance to think about it after I do it, because, the beauty of creativity is, especially when you have your own space, I am not hurting anybody trying the craziest shit in the world. And if you look up and you're kind of like, wow, that actually worked. But if you start thinking about it, you know, that has always been my creative process. It is really hard for someone to say, Jeff, make me a song like this, because my brain doesn't function like that. My brain is kind of like, make whatever you're going to make today, and I hope that it fits what somebody wants. And if not, maybe I can do it tomorrow. But I don't want to limit my creativity. And I think that was the thing, you know, being signed to a record company and just being in the industry. There's a ton of barriers that are put on you that you can't necessarily do. There, you know, Will and I were two very creative people that I believed early on in our careers, the creativity is what drew people to us. And as soon as you have a level of success, they want all of that shit to stop. It's kind of like, nope, I want you to continue doing exactly what you're doing that is making us all this money. We do not want to take any risk. And it was kind of like, you know, most of these people were signed being risk takers. And as soon as you prove that your theory is right, we no longer want you to take risks.
Yeah, that's I'm gonna go off on a geeky analogy, but I've had this conversation with some young programmers. Why do a lot of people decide to code or program? Because I literally can create nothing. It's something out of thin air, right? I can create, I can solve problems. You know, Google, the FANGs are willing to pay software engineers big money, but the reality is soon as you go to a big corporation for the big salary to code, you're no longer, what you're doing is you're being told to manifest somebody else's creation. So there's a bit of an analogy there, where the same place you're trying to get is at tension. While I have the mic, and I'll stop in a minute and give it back, I wanted to follow up and ask that's powerful where you talk about bringing your brain out of the studio. But I also look behind you on your screen, right? And there's stacks of black boxes that in days of old had big, thick manuals, but you're right. So how do you reconcile the fact that you need your brain to master the tool of your expression, but you don't want your brain to get in the way of that expression?
I've never been a manual reader.
Okay.
Like I've never been a manual reader. To me, the manual is to troubleshoot. I need to make a beat. I don't know how to quantize the beat. Go to the manual, go to quantize. It tells you how to quantize the beat, close the manual, keep going.
Okay.
Like, and YouTube has become YouTube University. You don't even need a manual now, because as soon as I get some shit, I go to YouTube and it's 13 people on there telling you this is how you do this. And if you want to do this, to the point that now I can Google, I need the proper compression on my master bus, and there's 50 people that give you ideas for that. So, but
it is nutty. Can you imagine how folks, how you did it back? I mean, the wealth of information now versus today is insane.
Yeah. But I used equipment. There were things that I was doing that the manual didn't tell you to do, that you kind of lucked up and figured something out. And a lot of it, someone could deem that it was a mistake. And that mistake was the magic. You know, I remember having an argument with a producer, you know, one of the older guys when Will and I first started, that he was watching me play keys, and he said that I was playing them wrong. And I said, there's no such thing. And he was just like, nope, your fingers are supposed to be like this. And I was just like, I can't hear how my fingers are. Like, you're telling me that technically I'm doing something wrong, but if it sounds good, there's no right and wrong when it comes down to creativity. Like, you're going based off of how you were taught, and I'm going based off of how it sounds.
You know what's interesting about that idea of the manual? I always used to say that social media, when it first came out, had no instruction manual. So there was nothing about the platforms and the tools. We just figured out how to use the tools and put our own application against. I remember Shaq was early on Twitter, and he used to do these things where you would have to find Shaq like during his games. Like Twitter didn't call him and tell him, do a scavenger hunt. I remember when the hashtag came out. It was definitely something that people just created. So even in technology, one of my famous lines is, none of these tools come with any instruction manuals. Parisa can tell you, Parisa was very popular on Clubhouse, and, she invented things. I think, the idea of a 24-hour broadcast show to talk about Masa Amini in Iran. It's not like, Clubhouse called her and told her that. So I just think like part of the innovation gene is throwing out the instruction manual, throwing out like whatever is supposed to happen. Like, how do you freak it? How do you put your own spin on it?
I think it comes out of necessity, right? I mean, it may have not been like pure necessity that, that Jeff wasn't going to read these instruction manuals. Like, could he have, if he had to, if his life depended on it? Sure. I feel like he probably could have, but out of necessity of just allowing himself to hear what the best outcome was going to be, hear what the music sounded like, versus knowing the technical way to do it or to execute it, where to exactly to place his fingers. It's like out of that necessity to just do what was best for him and honor his creative process. That's where that like innovation kind of came from, is what I'm kind of gathering. And just like with my journey on Clubhouse, that 24/7 room for it was 419 days, I believe. We were up and running, and it was out of necessity. It was out of necessity. Clubhouse is an app that reaches the globe, reaches everywhere, even with a lot of VPN effort, but it was something out of necessity that we needed to be able to communicate and have a place to share a lot of what was going on. It saved a lot of lives. It connected millions of people. So out of necessity, that innovative application of it was really birthed. Jeff, I have a question for you. So being that I've really invested a lot of my time into understanding the creative mind, and as it doesn't like to cooperate with the brain, or rather the brain doesn't like to cooperate with the creative mind, because they're two different things. A lot of people, I think, we assume that they're the same thing. The brain and the mind are two separate things. And the brain's job is just to make sense of this world, right? It's to understand that there's a red light. Might be a good idea for us to stop if we want to stay alive and keep others alive around us. And the creative mind is anything but that. It's about risk taking. It's about innovation. It's about bringing forth something that doesn't necessarily exist yet. It's going outside of the instruction manual. So being that you said that you basically try to remove your brain from, never bring your brain into the studio. I totally get that. And I can see why you have that ability to tap into your creativity, because you do that. Now, given that there are stresses in life, there are things that, as I will say, life is just going to keep on lifing. And it's not just about you get to play and be creative all day, because it's not necessarily all play either. It is work. How do you do that for you? What works? How are you able to make that conscious decision, that conscious effort, that ability to just, okay, I'm walking in the studio now, like I need to turn this off and let my mind, my creative mind, just go. How do you do that?
Yeah, that's a process. And it's a process that I don't think I really got a grip on until the pandemic. Like, until the world completely shut down, my brain didn't completely shut down. And I think, that was, I know it was a really, really crazy time for so many people. That was one of the most beautiful times of my life. I felt like reconnecting, with my family, and just centering, I felt like there was so much. I was traveling so much and going so many places, and, you were on this hamster wheel that, you felt like you had to do this in order to survive. And the fact that everything just kind of shut down and everybody was home. I think that I realized that I always enjoy Thanksgiving. I always enjoy Christmas because I feel like those are days that we have a goal and everybody is just set. It's kind of like, okay, Thanksgiving, who's coming over? We're going to eat and everybody's just going to chill. It's a day that I can look around and it's kind of like everybody is chilling. Like I like when everybody is chilling. And I think the pandemic was 2 years of everybody chilling, that I think that really helped me a lot, to more so increase my volume. I think I would come in the studio and I make something, almost every day. Myself and my partner, we would sit on the Zoom and we would just make 3 or 4 ideas a day and I would just put them to the side. And when it got to the point that people were just like, hey, do you have anything? I had this big vault of music that you could just say, here, check this out and let me know what you like. And that has paid dividends incredibly, that it was almost my template of how to move forward. That, okay, I need to keep this same pandemic mindset when it comes to creativity when everything is not here. When everything clears up, I got to keep that. I'm still in 2020 right now.
I love that you brought the reality of how much the pandemic really stung in the sense of a lot of aspects of life for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
But really harnessing the necessity that was brought forward. I found myself when the pandemic came around, I felt a little insensitive, so I didn't talk about it. But now that we're a bit removed, I do feel freedom to talk about it. But when the pandemic came around, I felt like I was living much of the same life because I feel like I entered my pandemic of life back in 2016, where everything was stripped away. My life was completely upside down. And that's when I started to really decide, okay, if I'm going to work from home, what does it look like? I wanted to homeschool my kids. It's what I felt was best for their path. And so working from home and then homeschooling as then a single mom, I'm like, what does this look like? So really the pandemic was very similar to what life started to look like back in 2016. And so once the pandemic came around, I started seeing everyone else kind of pick up on these realizations of what's absolutely necessary.
Mm-hmm.
What allows me to thrive? What are my actual needs? And what do I desire? Like, I really saw people starting to really tap into those things where I had been very, very tapped into them since 2016. And I realized, I'm like, wow, this is actually what life's about. We don't have to hit a rock bottom or a complete change in life to evaluate these necessities. But hey, we're here. This happened. Right. So I think that as much of a really negative stamp on the timeline of life that the pandemic really brought to everyone, I think there's a lot of really valuable pieces of that. I'm really grateful you brought that forward because yes, I genuinely, that's the saying that full word, the P full word, that's the most I've said it ever in any setting. Even once it did start to happen in 2020, because I'm so much about like, yeah, these things happen and how can we harness the most value and the best of it that's actually helped bring that realization to ourselves. So thank you for bringing that forward. And I'm grateful to see that like you're still there. That's where you're at. You're still in that mindset of just, turning the volume up. Really. I love that you said that.
Big anniversary this weekend.
Yeah.
You realize what's happening this weekend? I mean,
what is it?
Do you want to tell him, Lynette or Jeff? I can tell him.
Yeah. There you go.
Jeff, you can tell him.
Well, it's not this weekend. It's actually next weekend that we are on our 400th stream, which is a really big milestone to really sit and think. But you know, and that kind of goes back to the idea to play music was not to get to this point. You know, it was literally um the the world is falling apart, and one of the things that keeps us sane, you know, from my brother D Nice to Questlove, is the ability to play music. And you start playing music, like I was really playing music because it's kind of like, this is what I do, this is what I know. And I needed something. I was grateful to still be here, and you know, and you can play music, and then all of a sudden you look up and you're kind of like, wait a minute, so I can play anything I want. I'm not really owing to a dance floor, so we can really start digging into these crates and play some cool stuff. We could play stuff for people. You know, I would do streams on a Saturday for people to clean their house. You just playing really good music that put it on in the background, clean your kitchen and clean out your closet, clean out your garage, you know. And I look up and we are celebrating stream number 400, with is actually going to land on 420. Which was a little bit of creative juggling to kind of make it land like that. I almost
exactly
messed up.
an accident, right?
I was on stream 396, and I knew I needed to do a stream, and I told Lynette I'm gonna do a pop-up at some point in time, you know, to get to 397. You know, Saturday is 398. Next Wednesday would be 399, and then we're at 400. And Lynette was like, "Are you gonna stream today?" And I was like, "No." And she was like, you know, you're on 396. And I'm looking at the calendar and I see Saturday is 398. And I was like, yo, where's 397? Oh shit, I gotta do 397. So, you know, it's amazing to sit back and understand that over the past 4 years, I have streamed over a year of time. And you know, I'm blessed to have a community of people that seem to enjoy it around the globe. And we are going to celebrate on 420, 400 streams. 400
Nice.
streams.
Congrats.
Amazing.
We're glad we're glad you did it. We're glad you got to 400, brother. Thank you.
Yeah.
And if that doesn't speak to longevity, I don't know what does. Genuinely.
Yeah. You know, I think sometimes we have the tendency to look at numbers, look at time, instead of just putting your head down and do it. I don't think I can't arguably pinpoint how long my professional career has gone, because I choose not to count the times. This is something that I do. I'm not doing it for the amount of people or the amount of time. This is just something that you do. So I don't think I paid attention. You know, I didn't realize that we were close to 400 until Johnny, you know, our guy, was just kind of like, you know, you're about 12 streams away from 400. And I was just like, what? You know, and so I don't really put the number thing as a milestone. You know, sometimes you just put your head down and you do it.
So Jeff, there's an interesting thing there that you know. Look, you said you weren't thinking about where Mag Mob, where the streaming that you started in the pandemic was going. It sounds like there's a bit of purity of purpose, right? You just, like you said, you felt the world was ending. It's something you wanted to do. It's something you needed to do. Now you flash forward to the 400th episode. I guess I'll ask this two ways. How important was that to you getting here? And do you think it would have been different if you sat there in the pandemic? Okay, streaming's going to be big. I can get a lot of eyes, so I need to market on this channel, do that. Would you be in the same place today?
No,
I guess.
No, absolutely not. The throwing a dart at a target does not allow for you to color outside the lines.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like when you say this is my goal, and this is not to say don't set goals, but this, when you kind of say this is my goal, you know, there were so many things that changed on the fly of us doing this. Of, you know, we started, and you know, we started, there was a point in time when people were putting their Cash App up, you know, and I understood because we didn't know what the future was going to hold. And there were people who, you know, there were creatives who had jobs or who was out, that all of a sudden everything stopped and you don't know when it was going to start back up. There were sound men and there were club owners and club managers, and you know, it was just a really, really crazy time. And we, you know, we started streaming, and what not even thinking about that, you know, we started selling merch just to, you know, to try to cover all of the bases of this crazy time that we're going in. Like I kept saying, the pandemic was like Coachella. Like everybody wanted something to say that I survived the pandemic. But you know, this was us streaming with a iPhone and a roll and go mixer and these big ass giant lights that Lynette orders lights. You know, these boxes come in from Amazon, and she ordered better lights. She ordered better cameras. Like it was almost like, okay, we're here, and if this is what we're doing, let's lean into this. And you know, you wanted it to be quality, and this was also us. You know, this was a Saturday when she would come in with her whiteboard, and you know, we got a couple of bottles of wine, and we are just playing music, you know, and the kids are over here, and just, you know, it wasn't for a reason other than to help us get through it. But you know, we weren't thinking about the mag mob. The mag mob happened. We weren't thinking about, you know, multiple shows and podcasts and all the rest of these things. All of these things came from not throwing a dart at that target of, you know, we're just doing it. You know, people like that. What if we did this? What if we did that? You know, we literally were coming up with ideas for shows and how are we going to do something, just kind of sitting in the kitchen. What if you asked such and such to come down? Or what if we did that? You know, I laughed that we're on StreamYard. I remember the day that people discovered StreamYard, you know, that it was kind of like, wait a minute, so I can DJ in my house and Shortcut can be in his house and he can be backstage and then we can bring him on. And then it turned into, why don't we do a music festival? You know, but you almost need your brain to kind of be that open to things happening. Like this wasn't, you couldn't have forecasted this. It's kind of like today's event is going to tell you what tomorrow's event should be.
Well, and I throw in, by the way, last week Light was talking and you were talking about you ran out of mics to drop. She was dropping bars. You hit a few, from let's go to NASA to throwing darts at a dartboard doesn't allow you to color out of the line. But what's interesting there is what you just described on that other word is it sounds like Lynette was telling you, let's call NASA. Y'all just started working. Yep. And you had Lynette behind you saying, let's call NASA, but it was Amazon. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's just, you know what? And listen, I know she's right here. Lynette has a very creative mind. Lynette is very analytical in her approach to things. I would always throw ideas off of her. And this was before we decided to really work together. We worked together, but we didn't work together. And when I made a management change, I was actually talking to Will's manager, and he kind of stepped in and was kind of like, listen, I think, you know, if you want help, I got you. You know, I got you in this interim. And it might have been 3 days later that he called me back and he was like, I want to run something by you. He said, I don't think that there's anybody better to handle you than Lynette. And I said, she doesn't want to do it. And he said, let me talk to her. And I was like, okay. And it was funny because we hung up the phone and the phone rang again. And I heard Lynette pick the phone up, and I just crept right out the room and came over to the studio. And I'm looking at the phone, and the light is on the phone. The light is on the phone. Light's on the phone for about an hour. and then the light came off, and then I'm sitting at my desk, and I hear the studio door open, and she just stands there, and I won't turn around and look at her because she's just standing there. And she looked at me and she was like, "Is this what we're doing?" And I was like, "Yeah." And she was like, "Okay," and turned around and walked out. But it literally was having somebody with that brain to break things down is an asset. We're going to the moon, and she is the one that's like, all right, we got to make sure we got gas in the rocket before we can't just jump in the spaceship and just blast off. Like, I get it, but we need to dot a couple I's and cross a couple T's.
I love that. I just want to make mention that the chat in Jeff's chat is going nuts for Lynette. I know. So just so you know, Lynette, there's a lot of Lynette fans in there.
Oh, isn't that lovely?
Like I said, she's the real MVP here. So it is what it is. And I think that everyone knows that now.
Maybe a little. I want to go back. One thing you all completely missed. It was right there when you were talking about not reading manuals and taking your brain out of things and all of that. And no one even thought about DJing and turntablism as the thing of not reading a manual and making a thing do a thing. And it was right there. And I was like, so nobody's going to talk about the DJ?
It was. I did see it there.
I was like, but that's all.
Somebody in chat did say Transformer Scratch. Right? It was a version of that. But yeah, good call.
Exactly.
Well, especially like, I don't know if it's too loud. I saw the innovation of Grandmaster Flash and folks that came that had out of necessity. Parisa said it best, actually. When Parisa kept saying necessity, all I kept thinking was this very famous hip hop photo in the South Bronx where these young dudes have red and green wires and they're trying to find the wires for the block jam. And I've always said that hip hop is filled with technologists, filled with, men and women who came from the West Indies and had to figure out LAPD. Sorry. They had to figure out, how to be innovative out of necessity. And hip hop's whole existence is completely necessity. And I would say DJing is the medium at which we first find that necessity, because it really, if not for innovation, the world doesn't get to hear what we hear.
Yeah. I always thought that, I remember one of the most amazing things to me was the fact that the New York City blackout is what birthed the DJ culture. Like, to even think about that it was kind of like, we're doing something that we really can't afford to do. Yeah. And the New York City blackout happened and people just found their way and ended up with a whole bunch of equipment. And it was a whole bunch of DJ crews and a whole bunch of block parties and a whole bunch of house parties and it was born.
Yeah. Take it easily. And I'll hold some of this for a later episode, so I'm holding some. But yeah, I also find it impressive. Look, it was a word. We all grew up on bands, right? We all grew up on Sly and the Family Stone, and it wasn't possible for everybody to get equipment and get a band together and get together. So the ability to get access to what I'm just going to call these black boxes, whether they're turntables, whether it's a Lindrum, saying, okay, I can't get it this way, but we got these black boxes. I'm going to get my hands on it. I'm going to figure out how to make some sound emanate from this. And you guys hear it from me a lot, right? Sort of block party to blockchain, the fact that I think it is really lost how maybe more so than any other genre right now, or at a particular period in time, hip hop was enabled by a bunch of really smart people, like James said, a bunch of technologists, right? Figuring how to connect this to that and create. So I think one thing that is lost, especially, and when we get to talk about the technical, hopefully on another session, we'll raise it, is there's all these lights over time that hip hop has been cast under. In fact, I canceled Monk for a Snoop Dogg episode where they represented, they just represented hip hop as something a lot more base than what it really is, because the intelligence, the innovation, the ingenuity that had to live behind finding, developing, and making this art form what it is. There's a world full of Jay-Z's future CEOs, right? There's a world full of Troy Carters. There's a world full of Jazzy Jeffs that kind of get ignored and lost.
Yeah. I mean, you were making those black boxes do stuff that they weren't supposed to.
Yeah.
And at a time when you're setting up in the middle of the street and playing music, and there's somebody who is looking at you asking why. The early days of hip hop were really, really scary because, like you said, I grew up with bands. I grew up going to block parties, and every block party had a band. And then all of a sudden, now you got 2 turntables and 4 crates of records and these speakers, and you're playing music. And there was a point in time when people were kind of like, the DJ's job was to play music until the band comes on. And then it kind of switched around that the band just played until the DJ came on, and then the band became non-existent.
Yeah. What were you like as a kid, Jeff? Were you a tinker? Did you play with stuff before you found DJing? Were you into equipment and tinkering, or would you say you were more left brain or right brain when you were?
No, I was absolutely, like, I always give credit to my older brothers, because from them teaching you how to take a record out the jacket and put it, my brothers had a hi-fi system. It wasn't like the component set where everything was in one. They had a receiver that was separate. They had a turntable to set on top of the receiver, and a cassette deck that sat next to on the right side, and on top of that was a graphic EQ that you realize that if you turn this up, this turns the bass up, this turns, like, it's, there's a bass knob and there's a treble knob, and then there's an EQ that is kind of like, if I'm trying to get to 500 hertz, which is right in the middle, I can grab that and turn these knobs up, and all of a sudden your voice is right in front of somebody's face. And at 8 years old, they were just kind of like, let me show you how to take the record out the jacket. And I had the ability to, when they went to work, to play these records, as long as you knew how to take care of them, but, and at 8 years old, there wasn't hip hop records. I'm playing Herbie Hancock and Chameleon and things like that at 8 years old, which kind of really just opened up your mind to music, for me to get a little boom box with a cassette that I could make my own cassettes, from my brother's records. And then I could sit on a porch. And it was just weird because I'm 10 years old sitting on a porch playing Herbie Hancock Chameleon, which is not really the thing that you want to play for 10 years old, in West Philly. But I lost myself in all of this music.
You went full nerd with the hertz and all of that stuff.
Yeah,
for
listen.
like a second, like I watched you crack it up. It was just like, whoa.
But
okay.
but you know what?
Definitely over my head.
Them letting me use the equipment, they didn't teach me how to use the equipment. There wasn't a manual on you how to use the equipment. There were just fundamental things that you realize. If you're playing a turntable and there's jacks out of the turntable, it has to go into the receiver, out to in to out. So they were just very simple things that you learn that you just kept applying. until you got to the point of I want my own turntable and I want my own records and and I want to, so the tech part was very much so it was pushed by my older brothers.
Right on, right on.
And I also, I've said this before in another episode. Say it again. Back in the day when I was techie at a record label, 1995, and executives had Lotus Notes but barely knew how to use their computers. The only people that I could go to were the DJs and producers, and I always say it was Jeff, it was DJ Eddie F, who's computer science major, and it was Daddy O, who was just a nerd. And it was this other dude who wasn't a DJ yet, but he wasn't even into his own as a DJ, but his name was Derek. We know him as D Nice, but Derek was my web developer. In fact, we just talked about that a couple of days ago. But Derek was D Nice was a web developer. We would have these nerdy conversations, and it was really only the DJs and the producers that really understood what I was talking about. As Jeff said, most people thought I was crazy. The DJs and the producers were the ones that didn't think I was crazy. Now, I'll never forget, Jeff came back from Japan. I never even told you this. Jeff came back from Japan or Asia or something like that. And he was like, it's a wrap. I just saw our whole career on one CD. And I was like, oh, and this is Napster, LimeWire. This is when we were just moving files around. And again, I know.
I don't get what you mean. What was the whole career on one CD? Just to clarify for us, you're saying you saw your entire catalog bootlegged on one CD?
Oh man, I went to Bangkok, and I went into this mall, and I let's just say everything in the mall was illegal, everything. But you could go into a shop and you could literally look in these photo albums and see every piece of software out. Rosetta Stone, if you were trying to learn a language, if it was music software, it was finance software, and they all had numbers on them. And you would pick, the number if you wanted to order it. I want a new copy of Logic, and you would pick the number. But they had books of DVDs. So for people who know, a DVD has a lot more space than a CD, so you can hold more. And an MP3 is a smaller file than a wave, so you got a bigger place to store it on a DVD, but a smaller file. They would have MP3 DVDs of the entire Beatles anthology, and it was kind of like, okay, I just bought everything the Beatles ever made for $7. And I was like, what is my shit worth if I just bought the Beatles for $7? $7. And I'm realizing that I'm in the future, but that's coming. And I remember coming home and I was like, listen, I already seen what's happening and where we're headed, because we just hadn't gotten there yet. This was pretty much pre-Napster. And I'm just like, yeah, it's about to be a wrap. It is. I remember telling James that, and then you looked, and slowly but surely you saw everything start to change.
Jeff, question, connecting that to now, what do you see actively changing, yet not without like a solution necessarily in place, but what do you see? Where do you connect that to what's happening right now?
Sometimes it could seem like I am extremely bashing the record industry. And I think I am more than anything bashing the structure. Like, I think it's absolutely needed. I just don't think that it's needed that they take 97% and leave you 3% when you're the creative mind behind all of this music. I understand that the business part is a very, integral part, but it should not. I think that ratio is off. And watching what technology, like I've always looked at this as being a tennis match, that I felt like the industry was taking everything, and then all of a sudden the internet came out, and it was kind of like, wow, this is a way that you can reach your fan base without having to go through a record company. This is absolutely amazing. Oh my God, this is the shift that we all have been waiting for. And I think one of the lessons that I learned, that when you are in the room plotting and planning, so are they. And I think looking at that, and then you start watching the record companies invest in the tech part. Like James said, there was a point in time when they had zero desire to be involved in the tech part. And then they realized that that's where the future was. And then they invested in the tech part. And then it became this whole thing like, oh man, the algorithms have changed. We can no longer access our fan base as easy as we used to. How do we do it? And it's just the tennis ball was knocked to the other side again. And I think, with a lot of the stuff we're doing with creator mode and the blockchain is the next tennis ball being knocked back over to the other side of, this is going to put a lot of this stuff back into the hands of the creators and of the community, that it's not so much one-sided again. And it's just, it's understanding that these things change. Getting older, you start to realize like, wow, man, I remember my brother had an 8-track. Like, you can't even find an 8-track player now. Like, so much of the mediums that we used to use are no longer the thing now. It was records and 45s, and then cassettes came out, and then it was CDs, and CDs came out, and then all of a sudden it was MP3s, and now everything is streaming that you can't even hold it in your hand. And now here's the resurgence of vinyl again, and everybody wants to buy vinyl, and everybody wants a turntable. And just getting older to the point that you're starting to watch these things go in a cycle. You this is when your parents and some of the stuff that they say, that you kind of like, my mom telling me, boy, there ain't nothing new under the sun. You the youngest kid. Like, I've seen all of this stuff. There was shit that I would do with my mom that I remember coming home, and I got in some kind of trouble, and I came home and went upstairs to my room, and I opened my closet, and I climbed up into the top of my closet, and I hid something in the top of the closet and put the box on top and closed my closet. And I came downstairs, went in the kitchen, and opened the refrigerator to pour some juice. And when I closed it, my mom was standing right next to me with the thing. And I was just like, is there a fucking camera in here? Like, how did she know? And she's like, do you know your brother hid shit in that same spot? Like, you didn't invent that spot. That spot was here before you got here. So just watching the cycle go around, and me looking at my kids saying the same shit. Like, you didn't think I did that? Oh my God. Am I saying what my mom said to me? So that's pretty much what it is.
I love that. I literally, as you're describing that, I'm like, that's literally what happened.
Yeah, she was a ninja.
With my 10-year-old and I, not that long ago. I'm like, yep.
My new favorite is, I rarely ask you a question I don't already
there it
know
is.
the answer to. That's the new thing. It's like, dude, I'm not asking you this, just whatever.
Yeah.
You said two things, Jeff, that the medium.
Mm-hmm.
I remember having conversations recently, or not even, over the last couple of years, when, you've been talking to a couple of your producer friends and people in the industry, and there was some debates about whether the value was in the music or the medium, and if the vessel itself is the thing where the commerce and the money lie. And as a creator, on one side, you want to always believe that your art is where the value lives.
Mm-hmm.
But to your point about the machines and powers that be and institutions who have benefited very much, when you really think about, what they were always selling was the ability to sell the medium.
Yes.
To your point, back, there was a product there was a CD, there was a vinyl, there was vinyl, there was a cassette, but the ability to produce or control, the medium was where all of that leverage was or is, even to this point. If we're talking about streaming, we're talking about eyeballs and who's in charge of your people. It's the person who controls the medium controls that. And how do we work within that system and create your own version of the medium, even if it's only for your own personal art, so there's that. But then there's this idea of tangibility. And I think that no matter what happens, people, it's been clear to me that the idea of having something tangible has been important. And I think that's the part that creatives, we should be focusing on, if that makes sense. Like, think of it when, okay, streaming is a thing. So now, the idea of an MP3 made you feel, or streaming, I think, took away the tangibility of music.
Yeah.
And, because even if it was an MP3, for example, even when you were clicking that button that was 99 cents, you still were transferring
the file around and
something that became yours, right? And so then once that went away, for a while, you do start to look, maybe we went crazy, like, no, just sell the merch and give the music for free. And again, you're still trying to find this tangible thing. And I just wonder if, when I start thinking about where things are headed, I am keeping this idea of tangibility at the top of mind for me. Like, even if it's not like physical, like it's something in general feels tangible to make people then still hold a certain value to it, in a way that, the files and songs streaming in thin air just makes it seem so much more abstract or not real, or somehow needing to just exist as a free thing, because it is something that's supposed to just exist in space, even if it required a human to put forth some time and effort in that thing. And so I know I'm kind of talking in circles and rambling here, but
you're spot on.
I think that's even when you were talking about blockchain and talking about NFTs and things like that, there was still something tangible there, or even people getting used to the idea that there is something tangible attached to the thing. And
well, Lynette, I don't know if you caught it, but I want to say, right after we were on with MC Light last week, right after she got off, she went on Instagram and asked, how do people want to get their music? The majority of responses I saw said, I missed buying things, right? And I think and I think it's more than nostalgia, it's psychology. My trip to Tower Records, going through the tape rack to then get cassettes when it was cassettes, that was part of the experience, right? And there's some way psychologically to do that. I do think what happens is, yes, I love my unlimited streaming music, but it devalues and dismisses the personal relationship with the music, right? When you have tangibility. And my last thing, Jeff, because I see you nodding and I'll throw it off, is, man, what's driven me crazy, I'm an unlimited Apple Music fan. As much as you used to like to read liner notes, right? I can't even get credits until just recently they rolled it out. You can't even see who the bassist on a song was, right? And I think there's a devaluing in the relationship with the music that gets lost, and those that had experienced it yearn for it. Lynette, so I 100% understand what you're saying, right? But
yeah, that is it. What's funny, and I kept saying, we as humans don't really understand the hard drive theory. that your brain is a hard drive, and in a hard drive, you only have a certain amount of space that you before you fill up your hard drive. The fact that you would go to Tower Records and someone would potentially play music, you would see if you liked it or if it was something that you wanted, you grabbed it and you brought it home. You might have brought home 2 or 3 different things, but you got a chance to live with those things. You got a chance to listen to it from front to back. You got a chance to read the liner notes. You became a true fan. I think once it got to the point that I'm going to give you access to every piece of music in the world, people don't, that's too much for your hard drive. And your hard drive just kind of gets full and things start to become dismissive. That favorite album that you would you listen to halfway through because you got 37 other things that you want to listen to and you don't understand. I realized that I binge watch television shows. I can only watch maybe 2 shows at a time because my brain can't binge watch a whole bunch of shows. But I also, as much as I may love the access to be able to watch every episodes of Suits, I really enjoyed getting my episode once a week. Like, it made me excited for the next week. That pretty much being spoon-fed, it put things in a different perspective. It did not overload my hard drive. And I think, that whole idea of 130,000 songs come out on Spotify every day is mind-blowing.
Wow.
Like, you're not going to listen to 130,000 songs in your life. You can't listen to all of the music that came out on Spotify today in your lifetime. So imagine how much stuff gets fallen between the cracks. It's this weird theory that we wanted so much for the gatekeepers to be gone. And I actually believe that gatekeepers are good if they're good gatekeepers. It's gatekeepers is the security in a club. Sometimes you have that security that is a little bit too overzealous and take their job too serious, but take the security away from the club and watch what happens to the club. Gatekeepers are absolutely necessary.
And I'm not really going to jump in. Sorry, except just to say, Jeff, I literally past 2 days have been processing this in my head. Well, look forward to chopping it up more about it, right? But this is around information, media, social media, right? There's a real benefit to no gatekeeper. Everybody can get in. But when everybody can get in, it's a whole fucking lot to manage, right? And it saturates your hard drive, causes it to churn and defragment. Anyway, couldn't help but jump in on that because it was so resonant to an internal dialogue I was having earlier, Jeff.
But it also brings in the more, because no matter how many times you open up, you always still want something to bring it down and put it into a more digestible form. So for the fact that there are that many artists, songs, that amount of music, the average person doesn't have the capacity to process it all. But if I could rely on 1, 2, 3, even 10, say, curators of an experience or curators of whatever this is, I'll listen to them. It's a DJ, right? Or it's even a journalist, a columnist, whoever the people are that are in your space that you rely on to help you navigate the world or relate to it or process it or understanding it, finding those people. I think that is, one of those conversations that I've been having, more recently with people about, all right, I don't have time to navigate those spaces, but I know this person does. And so I know this is what I rely on them to do. And I align with their taste and their sensibility. So I'm just going to follow their lead on this thing because that way I know that I am not being inundated with things I don't care about.
Yeah.
But the key is to seek those people out individually because nowadays we used to think that we could do that on our own with the medium, And now we can't because there's an algorithm that is not actually a human trying to give us the thing, right? And or yeah, not quite. They don't get it right. They just don't get it right.
Yeah.
And so that is where, regardless of the technology and all of those things, you're gonna always need to figure out the human element. But again, that gives that tangibility thing again now, because an algorithm or an automation could absolutely give you things, and yet a real person, a tangible person, is who you want to rely on and trust a little bit more to give you, you know, even the calculated risk you're willing to take on a new artist or a new thing. Is like, okay, well, you know, Jeff steps out on a few things, and you know, he doesn't steer me wrong. I can ride with what he's doing. Or James is testing out this new technology, and okay, I see where this is headed. You know, he'll keep me up to speed on that thing. And for creators, I hope that that's something they even consider in themselves when they're putting together their brands, their platforms, their art, all of that, like telling that full story and having those people around them that help them tell a story. And, you know, those are the people.
I'm going to jump in on this real quick, Lynette. I'm grateful that you mentioned the tangibility piece, because I think it's something that we, that often, I say we as in just a collective kind of conversation, and where a lot of conversations around tech are kind of, I feel like a narrative is kind of being pushed a certain way, where tangibility isn't necessarily the priority. And to keep things human-centric, even amidst this very technological world and emerging tech that we are involving in all of this, is if we don't allow ourselves to prioritize tangibility, you know, actually touching the thing, whatever it is that we are valuing, then we are denying the necessity of our five senses. And it's that basic. And you may not be tasting what a CD tastes like, right? You're not tasting, you're not involving that sense. But to eliminate one of the senses that you connect the enjoyment, the passion, the experience, the emotion, the whatever it is that you're connecting, however many senses that you experience for that moment, for that thing. If it's music, it's music. Like, to deny that tangibility, you're denying one of those senses that has always been a part of it. And I feel like as we continue to move into more of these blockchain conversations, and as things become more integrated, we must prioritize tangibility. And it doesn't have to be something that's just silly and just like checking the box, but like, no, what actually would be meaningful right now? Because as we continue to not just have, you know, more tech involved in this program, but I'm talking about things globally, across all sectors, across all industries. If we don't prioritize tangibility, then we've lost the ability to genuinely connect as humans. And if there's anything that I'm really picking up on with a lot of these AI conversations and a lot of these like blockchain conversations, is the fact that if we do not prioritize the fact that we were meant for connection, humans were meant to connect. If we do not allow that to still be a priority, we are seeding our own demise. So thank you, Lynette, for bringing that forward, because that is definitely something we're going to be diving into much deeper in the shows to come. It's definitely probably a little more of a spicy topic, but I think it's also one that's necessary, and one that we get to have responsibility in having if we're going to even introduce anything.
Yep.
So,
yeah. There's a balance. There's a balance of all of this. I think, you know, sitting in the studio, I went through a complete rewiring process about a month ago in the studio, rewiring a bunch of analog gear back into my setup. That there was something that told me, don't get rid of this gear. There's something that told me, don't get rid of this keyboard. They may have come out with something brand new, but don't get rid of it, to watch the cycle go completely around. And that keyboard that you spent $300 on that you thought that you should just get rid of is $25,000 right now. And it's everybody wants it. And how do you incorporate it back into your system? Like, I'm laughing that I went from all of this analog gear and keyboards and stuff to everything being inside the computer, to now I'm doing half in the computer and half out. Like, that's why I said it's a balance. You know, with a lot of this technology, I am 100% for all of the technology at a balance.
Yeah.
Mic drop. You can just end the conversation and the stream now. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, this was such a rich conversation. Shout out to the chat room,
Man.
who referred to this as a Douglas Rushkoff like conversation. If you guys don't know who Douglas Rushkoff, he is a technology futurist. We really did go really deep in this conversation. The one thing I'm just going to go back, this tangibility thing. I'm so glad you brought that into this. I echo what Parisa had to say, and Parisa's thoughts around this idea of, as much tech as we're creating, it's really important to think about the tangible. It reminds me of this sort of forecasting that I have right now that says that as much as we become digital, I've been thinking a lot about the physical event, like how important like physical experience are going to be. And if you're a creator out there, like if you just dial up your physical experience, if you're creative around your physical experience now, I think that's the cheat right now. Perry says, like when I use the word cheat code, but that's the hidden gem is as much time as people are spending in these devices. What if you dialed up the live experience? And I just got back from an experience recently this weekend, where they just did little things. It was just like the little thing, like it was the music that was playing when I was walking to coffee. It was like those little unique things that you do for your fans, for your customers, for your audience. I think those little things actually begin to mean something even more the more digital we get. So I just want to share that. The other thing I had to shout out, this is a nostalgic thing for me, is I spent most of my time in this place called Penny Lane, which was a store that used to sell used CDs in Westwood. And there was a guy named Jeff, and Jeff would go in and we would spend an hour and a half there just talking about music. He would say, "You like this? You ever heard this?" And that interaction between me and Jeff was really important because Jeff like expanded my mind. I was a curious 20-year-old, and I sat in the store every day when I could for hours, just because Jeff was, to Lynette's point, he was my curator. By the way, in that store, a woman walks in from Columbia Records and was like, "Hey kid, you want an internship?" That's actually how I got my Columbia Records internship. Wow. I was talking to Jeff. And, she came in. Actually, I saw Jeff as a waiter recently at a restaurant. Man, that guy meant so much to me because his music knowledge was beyond. And then the other piece, essentially, we talk about Tower Records, man. I remember just, not being able to afford, just maybe one or two CDs or something. I remember being a record executive and like, they literally give you a credit card. You buy everything. They're like, every Tuesday, just go buy all the records. And I remember like, wow, this doesn't even feel like, like I don't have the same thing because I basically can get all the records, that I want on my Amex. And I missed that. And I used to sit, I guess the alternative is I used to go to Jeff's house and I would just sleep on the couch in the guest room and I would just go through the vinyl. And I find myself doing that today. My friend Arturo Nunez and Rich Medina own a place called Dante's Hi-Fi. And they had a little pop-up this weekend on a boat. And they just had vinyl, just like crates of vinyl. Yeah. And I just found myself at the party, just reading jackets.
Touching it.
Touching it.
You're touching it.
Touching just felt so good. So anyway, that's what my contributions to this. Perry, so once again, just an amazing moderated conversation. Thank you so much for what you do and how you do and why you do and putting up with my things that I drive you through. And I'm saying it publicly. I apologize for all that I put you through leading up to this show. Thank you so much. Thank you. So yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate all of you for following my lead in this conversation, because I know that I definitely go an unconventional route with our conversations here, and it's intentional. I want people to, if they're going to invest even 30 seconds of their day into anything, if they're investing 30 seconds of their time into this conversation, I want it to feel different. I want it to be different, because I think that we all have the opportunity to make a difference in this life. And even if it's with a conversation on StreamYard, or maybe Instagram or YouTube or Twitter/X, getting used to saying that, any of these platforms, that it's simple. It can be very simple to make a difference and to show up differently, and to, allow our creativity to come forward versus going into default programming.
Yeah.
So, thank you all.
Appreciate it.
This was incredible.
Very good.
Peace.